So to start off today, we have some park-related announcements. Out in California, Disney announced that they would build a new parking structure on the east side of Disneyland, with construction beginning in 2026. Other than the start date, this is not really news. On the podcast here, we've already discussed this new parking structure and how it will be the first step in the larger Disneyland Forward project in Anaheim, as Disneyland needs to shift parking from around the Disneyland Hotel, likely over to the Pixar Pals area, and then shift some of the day guests who regularly park there over to the east side so the parking lots around the hotel can then slowly be converted into theme park space. That project for the new parking structure will begin in a little over a year. On Thursday, we also got an announcement of where the new Coco boat ride would be built in DCA. It will go in one of the two places we speculated last year, specifically in backstage areas to the left of Paradise Gardens. This likely means where the parade barn and other structures are now by the Incredicoaster. Our other speculated location was to the right of Paradise Gardens to replace the 30-plus-year-old Goofy Sky Coaster and also to fill in some unused land over there, but it's not going to be there, it will be on the left. We also got a start date for construction, which is fall 2025. Again, the date here is new. We still don't know the size of the show building, but this will not be a long ride, as the space here is not large. To spitball a construction timeline, as there's very little demo to do here, maybe the entire project takes a year and a half, perhaps a little more. But with the very little info we presently have, I'd say that summer 2027 looks like a reasonable spitball guess. Likewise, we now have a closing date for Monsters Incorporated Mike and Sully to the Rescue at DCA. It will close early in 2026 as Disney prepares to build a water-focused Avatar land in that space. Again, last fall, we already speculated that the space that presently holds the Monsters Incorporated ride, the outdoor stage, Stage 12, and the bus and transportation loading zones behind it would be the likely place for the Avatar expansion. But what we have now is a closing date for the Monsters Incorporated ride, which is the first step towards actual construction. But the big news this week, the news with a lot of details, came out 2 days earlier and was focused on the Magic Kingdom in Florida. On Tuesday morning over a Zoom call, Disney announced its timeline to close Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island in Florida. They also released some very interesting new artwork. But as you will see, there are a lot of moving pieces in and around this announcement. That is, we know when the attractions will close, but not really a timeline for anything beyond that. And there's some complex and difficult issues around Disney's goals here, especially with the headliner parade slated to open in the same park, a parade that is now 2 months late, and also with Halloween party season on the horizon. So, in today's episode, we'll pull all of this apart, discuss what it means and how it will change that park moving forward. So if you've got all those details, let's now kick into the show. We now have a closing date for Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island. These areas will close to the public at the end of the day on July 6th, essentially the end of the 4th of July holiday weekend. But construction walls won't go up immediately. So if you visit in mid-July, you'll likely be able to see the river and the island from the shore. Construction walls will likely go up a few weeks after the attractions close, but more on all that in a second. Today we have 3 big questions that we're going to try to answer. First, when are those construction walls actually going up around the remains of the Rivers of America? Second, what does this mean for the revised construction timeline? And third, what does the new concept art reveal about how plans have changed for this project, and what exactly is this concept art trying to communicate, and to whom? We'll start with that last question, the one about concept art, but there are some interesting things here as Disney is starting to use concept art to reach different communication goals than it has historically in the past. This past week on Tuesday, Disney released a new piece of concept art for that Cars expansion area over at the Magic Kingdom. The artwork is a bird's eye view of the planned Cars area in Frontierland. When I say bird's eye view, I mean something that resembles an artistic overhead map focused on the expansion area. This is a very traditional approach for Disney going back to the mid-1950s with Disneyland. For example, think of early concept presentations of Disneyland before it opened, with art by Herb Ryman or Peter Ellenshaw. These are all overhead views of that amusement park area, which was an attempt to explain the project to companies or to the public. Many later pieces of concept art were arranged by Herb Ryman, typically of individual areas or attractions, often with a slant toward realism with notes of optimism worked into the art. For example, Herb Ryman's concept presentation of the 1967 New Tomorrowland project at Disneyland presents a newly remade land with small pockets of guests on the street and walkways. There are golden shafts of sunlight slanting down onto the area, which offers a visual sense of optimism and wonder. But the presentation of the buildings, the people mover vehicles, the landscapes, the rocket jets, all strongly slant toward architectural realism. That is, the rides and attractions generally look like what would be built there. During this time, the main purpose of concept art, beyond presenting the idea to the public, was to interest American companies in sponsoring individual attractions, as sponsorship money was essential to underwrite large new projects. The artwork that was released this past Tuesday is not like this at all. It's a departure from traditional Disney concept art. The earlier artwork for this exact same project that was released at the end of last summer followed the traditions of Disney concept art. That initial artwork from 2024 presented an overhead view of the new Cars area, sparsely populated with guests, with the area surrounded by clouds, which suggest a sense of mystery. In terms of optimism, at the back of the painting above Big Thunder, there's a lightly painted rainbow. I should point out that in this initial piece of concept art, there's a few water features such as a waterfall, but there's very few water features in this project as it was pictured back then. That's going to be important in a few minutes. But the rock structures, the buildings, the ride tracks, the vehicles, and the existing structures like those that are presently in Frontierland are all presented with art values that slant toward realism. But this is not at all what was released this past Tuesday as a second attempt at concept art. The 2025 artwork that we just got is presented in a far more cartoon or illustrative fashion than traditional Disney concept art. And the new artwork reveals a few important things about changes to the project, or at least changes in emphases, and also what Disney is now trying to communicate about this area, and also to whom this new artwork is intended to communicate with. The new piece of artwork is again a bird's eye, but it's arranged in the illustration style of cartoons or of kids' picture books, rather than as traditional Disney concept art. It's an overhead presentation of the yet-to-be-named Cars area with a visual emphasis on water areas, and a little more about that in a bit. with a presentation of the ride area, the walking area, some play areas, and in the background, Big Thunder and buildings like Grizzly Hall. The area, or at least the centermost portion of it, is loosely based on the Rockies, and this will be a park area called Piston Peak. There's also a mountain that looks somewhat like a car piston. And in the corner of the map, there's a new character, a green truck styled like those in the Cars movie, who is wearing a green Ranger's hat. This truck is named Ranger J. Autobahn Woodlore, and that middle name here, Autobahn, is spelled like the German expressway for cars. This truck is based on the 1950s cartoon character of a human ranger called Ranger J. Autobahn Woodlore, and that human cartoon character's middle name is Autobahn, like John James Audubon, the 19th century French-American naturalist. And I realize that this here is a very deep cut in the world of Disney cartoons. Ranger Woodlore initially appeared in the Humphrey the Bear cartoons from the mid-1950s. If you've never seen any of them, go Google Disney cartoon in the bag. You'll find it oddly on YouTube because it's not on Disney Plus, but I think this is a fabulous short cartoon. But anyway, in terms of the new concept art, there's some interesting structural changes here in terms of how this art is put together. During Walt's time, and even for decades after that, concept art was usually arranged in such a way to attract corporate sponsors. Herb Ryman, for example, would paint in small groups of guests who appeared interested in the new show or land or attraction, with the suggestion that these same guests would also be interested in the sponsor attached to these attractions and would leave with a positive impression of both the attraction and the sponsor. One of the interesting things here with this new cartoony concept art, it has no people in it anywhere. Zip, nada, nothing, not a soul in sight. So this concept art is not directed at potential sponsors who want to see happy guests enjoying the show and, by extension, the idea of their products. This new concept art highlights how the underlying financial structure of the Disney parks has changed over the last 15 or 20 years. And here's what I mean. If we set our DeLoreans outfitted with a time flux capacitor back to the late, 1980s, we'll find that pretty much everything on the Future World side of what was then called Epcot Center had a sponsor. Spaceship Earth was sponsored by the Bell System. Exhibit areas in Communicore were sponsored by multiple technology companies. Universe of Energy by Exxon. World of Motion by General Motors, The Land by Kraft, the Imagination Pavilion by Kodak, Horizons by General Electric, The Living Seas by United Technologies, Wonders of Life, which opened at the end of the 80s, by Metropolitan Life. But today there are very few large corporate sponsors left in the area once called Future World. In part, the corporate landscape has changed over the last 2 decades, largely because corporations are using PR and marketing budgets in different ways that they see as more effective, such as with online ads. In terms of pavilion sponsors, of the above companies in that list, only GM remains as a sponsor of Test Track. There are still sponsorship arrangements in the Disney parks, but they tend to be fewer, smaller, and financially less robust. Disney, for example, tends to get more sponsors for festivals like Food and Wine, which are lower dollar figure contracts and are limited time arrangements, compared to the original Epcot Pavilion sponsorships, which were typically for periods of 10 years. Epcot was built for large corporate sponsors, but mostly this type of corporate sponsorship started to end about a decade after Epcot opened, which was a problem for Disney, as Disney used to plan large attractions around a number of financial revenue streams, from sponsoring companies, from increased hotel and ticket sales, from merchandise, and so on. Disney still sees increased ticket and hotel sales from new attractions, along with money from merchandise. But the income, or at least some of the income from traditional sponsorships, has been partially shifted over to other revenue opportunities, such as individual lightning lanes. Or to put it directly, park guests purchasing individual lightning lanes are filling part of the gap that was once more fully covered by corporate sponsorships. Classic Herbie Ryman concept art from the 1960s, as I mentioned, typically shows a project with small pockets of people deeply engaged, enthusiastic about whatever this new installation is, with the underlying suggestion that these people would also have a positive impression of the attraction sponsor, so long as that potential sponsor then ponied up a large stack of cash to sponsor that new ride. What's changed between the 1960s and now is that there are now fewer massive corporations, and many of those corporations don't see theme park attractions as the best use of their marketing and PR dollars. Though Disney still has some corporate sponsorships in its parks, some of the cost to develop large attractions has now shifted essentially over to paid lightning lanes. So making sure that fans are interested and supportive of new attractions is now a financial component that Disney didn't have a few years ago. The new piece of concept art released this past Tuesday is clearly directed at fans to change their impression of this Cars Area project, and is not directed at possible sponsors. For example, again in this concept art, there are no guests anywhere. Guests were traditionally included in concept art to show potential sponsors how an inclusion in a Disney park would positively change the public's view of their company or of their products. But the lack of people here in this art allows guests to more easily imagine themselves there exploring the land. And so what does this new concept art reveal about the Cars Area being developed at the Magic Kingdom? And here I've looked at both pieces of concept art carefully, the one from 2024 and the one from this past week. And I do think some elements have changed, and it's not just a different visual interpretation or emphasis as to what the artist is presenting. And remember, the audience for this art is not potential companies who might plunk down $100 million or more to sponsor an attraction, but rather millions of fans who each might plunk down $20 for an individual lightning lane. If this new Cars Road Rally ride has a capacity of 1,800 guests per hour, and if Disney admits 2 people from the standby line for every 1 person from the paid lightning lane, you're looking at about $60 million of lightning lane revenue for the year. Again, there's some assumptions built into that figure, so it may be lower or higher, but regardless, it's a serious chunk of change that partially replaces the revenue stream traditionally tied to sponsorships. So if concept art is a visual argument meant to shape the opinion of the intended viewer, who is that intended viewer here? Well, not companies. Rather, the intended audience here is you, the potential visitor. And here is the visual argument. Disney wants to make this project appeal to you and to millions like you who might throw down $20 for a lightning lane pass to ride the new ride without waiting in the standby line. If there are 2 good things about individual paid lightning lanes, it might be these. The first would be this. fans now have a little bit more collective power, and maybe only a bit, when they, as a large group, indicate that a new attraction in its early proposed form is not something that they'd put out any additional money to pay via a lightning lane. The second is that in a partially post-sponsorship theme park world, WDI now has additional revenue streams to justify large, expensive new attractions. Now the good news, at least what I think is good news. Disney seems to have heard the fans, i.e. its customers, i.e. those people it wants to get $20 from to ride the new ride, that changes were necessary here. In the new piece of concept art, again the cartoony one from this last week, Disney appears to have adjusted its layout for the area to focus a little more on water features and a little less on hardscape. In the new art, there's still something that looks a lot like a small river that runs from the entrance of the Haunted Mansion all the way over almost to Big Thunder. And no, this is not Rivers of America, and no, it's not large enough for the Liberty Bell, but it is a noticeable, moving body of water that parallels the boardwalk in Frontierland. And though there were a couple water elements in that 2024 concept art, there was nothing like this. A small river that moves like a remnant or the ghost of the river that is there now. So it does look like Disney's thinking about the necessity of a large water feature for this section of the park has now changed. There is a greater emphasis on water in the new art, and there is a lower emphasis on concrete and rock work. And I do think this is partially related to how the power structure has changed between Disney, sponsoring companies, and potential guests. As there's less money to be made from sponsorships, and therefore there's less power over on the sponsorship side, Disney is now starting to look a little more towards fans and their reaction in terms of how things might be arranged here. Also, just to anticipate some objections, if this had always been the plan to have a small river run along this same path, all Disney needed to do last September was explain that, and about 50% of the ill will online for this project would have disappeared. So again, I think some elements of this project have actually been adjusted, and this is just not a different interpretation that emphasizes more of what fans wanted. And just out of curiosity, I am wondering if the remnant of the river is purely for aesthetics. A river, in my opinion, is far more lovely to look at than cement, or if there's some possible practical element to it in terms of storm mitigation and channeling runoff water into the canal system. Remember, storm mitigation was one of the big issues in getting that permit approved that would allow work to begin. But a discussion of how this area would handle hurricanes and torrential downpours that Florida sees pretty regularly was not part of this announcement at all. The next thing to notice is that Disney released this information on a Tuesday morning over a Zoom call at 11 a.m. Disney at least thinks that this announcement is good news and will be positively received by at least most fans. When Disney has bad news, they release it late in the day on Friday so it can be buried under other news over the weekend. As a rule of thumb, most announcements that Disney thinks are truly problematic come out on a Friday afternoon. Remember that announcement where Disney would close Muppet Courtyard? Well, that was a Friday announcement. So Disney is at least under the impression that this art and the announcement here will mostly be well received by fans. Again, there's a communication loop going on here. Disney has taken in impressions of this artwork last year, and now Disney is responding to them in a way they feel will be appreciated by those who felt a whole lot of concrete over in Frontierland was probably not the best way to go. Here's another element that appears to have been changed. Though Tom Sawyer Island is going away, similar play elements from that island now seem to be incorporated into the Cars Area project. There's a walking path through part of the Rocky Mountain-styled park setting, and there is now what appears to be a barrel bridge going across a pond. There are standard wooden bridges elsewhere. There's a path that moves alongside a garden of geysers. There's a hollowed-out tree to explore, and a fort-style Forest Service lookout tower, and toward the back of the area there even appears to be a water wheel, not so different from the water wheel that presently is attached to Harper's Ferry at the front of Tom Sawyer Island. So the flavors of the old island now appeared to be incorporated into the designs for the revised area. You can zoom in on the map and see it yourself, or you can think of this new area next to the major ride as a version of Tom Sawyer Island meets a mini version of the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail at DCA. Let me add in one more thing about this. It's clear in the new art that as part of the Cars attraction, the vehicle will go into caves near the river, and that too in a small way is a callback to the riverside caves of Tom Sawyer Island. Another thing that irritated fans, the removal of the Liberty Bell. Disney now said that they are exploring ways to save the Liberty Bell, or at least parts of it. I have no idea where the ship or where parts of the ship will end up. I don't think Disney does yet either. But last I checked, Disney has a whole resort area focused on the culture and geography of Louisiana. So it's possible the ship, or at least part of it, might end up over at Port Orleans, or maybe it could be saved for Villains Land. And I realize this is a deep cut, but in the 1977 movie The Rescuers, Madame Medusa, that's the film's villain, has a dilapidated riverboat as her swampy hideout. I might also point out as a third option that a permanently docked boat over on Crescent Lake, perhaps by Boardwalk, could be turned into interesting usable space for shops and restaurants. It is a big ship, and finding a reasonable use where the size of this grand ship doesn't disrupt the scale of the surrounding area will be a bit of a challenge. But Disney said that they are exploring options. I'm pretty sure that if Disney wanted, it's possible to save the boat wholesale. It would require a heavy hauler and specialized equipment, but I think it's doable, especially for a short distance on property. If you're wondering how all this would work, it would go something like this. Rivers of America, as we've talked about on previous episodes, is connected to a canal system. So to move the boat over to the docks at the central shop, which Disney has done before, the Liberty Bell would need to take the side canal off Rivers of America. The Liberty Bell would then be towed to the opening of this canal. This is more or less behind Big Thunder and Tiana's. To get down the length of this canal, though, Disney also needs to move the railroad bridge, which shifts on a pivot. Once the railway bridge is moved, the Liberty Bell can be towed down this canal, past the parade float storage and staging area, also past the place where the electrical water pageant barges are docked during the day. From there, the canal opens into the Seven Seas Lagoon, about halfway between the entrance to the Magic Kingdom and the Grand Floridian. You can see this canal opening easily from the monorail. The monorail goes right over it. From there, the Liberty Bell needs to be towed across the lagoon over to the water bridge next to the Contemporary. To get this boat safely beneath the overhead monorail beam, a crew would first need to take down some elements that rise above the pilot's house, such as the crown smokestack. So some partial disassembly is required for this journey. This water bridge, which is regularly used by Disney World launches and cruisers that guests can take, connects the lagoon to Bay Lake. From there, the Liberty Bell needs to move to the back of Bay Lake, far past Bay Lake Tower, but generally on that side of the shore, where there's another canal that takes watercraft to the central shops, typically for repair or refurbishment. There's a dry dock there, so I'm guessing that a system could be arranged to move the Liberty Bell from that dock onto a heavy hauler to be transported somewhere else. If Disney does move the Liberty Bell over to central shops, it will likely happen late at night. But from the tone of the Disney announcement, I'm not even sure Disney knows what it's going to do with the boat, or even if they want to save the whole ship or just select parts of it. But what was clear was this: Disney believes that preserving or repurposing the boat, or part of it, was important to satisfy a certain vocal group of fans. Again, the audience for all of this isn't potential corporate sponsors. It's fans and potential guests who Disney would like to juice up about the project so that a lot of them would visit when this opens and also pony up some Lightning Lane money to ride the new attraction. I think what Disney World execs are finding here is that now that Disney World is over 50 years old, Central Florida has a group of vocal, dedicated fans who enjoy the nostalgia of the parks, much like Disney has seen with its California fans for a few decades. And now that revenue to support new attractions is more directed at visitors and fans as opposed to corporate sponsors, it's even more important to find plans and presentations that excite guests. Remember, this very same Cars area project was the only one that was booed last year at the D23 convention in Anaheim. It wasn't booed from every part of the audience, but it was noticeable. So this is the shift that we're seeing now, as revenue is now tied in new ways to guests. Guests are being included, I think, a bit more in how decisions are being made, whereas 30 years ago, Disney would have been far more interested in how corporations responded to concept art, as a big chunk of money was coming from them. So we know that the Liberty Bell and the island are closing to guests at the end of the day on July 6th. But when will the river be walled off so that guests can no longer see it? And what does this mean for the overall timeline of the project? Disney was a lot more vague on this, simply saying that the walls will go up weeks after the attractions close. The walls will likely go up at night or over multiple nights. The two big sets of late-night events that the Magic Kingdom needs to work around are, first, after-hour rehearsals for the Starlight Parade, a parade that is already 2 months late in its premiere, and the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween parties, which start August 15th. But in the Magic Kingdom calendar, I think there are some clues as to when these walls will actually go up and when you'll need to say goodbye to Rivers of America forever. So let's start with this. There have been some atypical changes to the Magic Kingdom's summer calendar. The first has to do with extended evening hours. These are 2 additional hours, often from 10 to midnight, at the Magic Kingdom each week for those staying at deluxe hotels, DVC villas, and the Swan and Dolphin. These are usually a key selling point for cash stays at deluxe hotels. Starting the first week of July, extended evening hours are moving from the Magic Kingdom over to Animal Kingdom. It's not unusual for Disney to take some pressure off of the Magic Kingdom and move extended hours elsewhere, either to Animal Kingdom or Hollywood Studios. This happens most every year during the Halloween and Christmas party season. But typically, this shift doesn't take place until September. This year, there's a change beginning the first week of July, many weeks before the first Mickey's Not So Scary shows up at the park. Here's what I think all of this means. For the first half of July, the removal of those extended evening hours at the Magic Kingdom is likely to give entertainment more time to work out the kinks with the upcoming Starlight Parade. This is a technology-focused parade that is almost surely going to have some issues that need to be worked out before its July 20th premiere date. With those extended evening hours, which typically end at midnight, it's difficult to clear the park by 1:30 a.m. But without those extended evening hours is a far more reasonable goal to mostly clear the park, with perhaps rehearsals starting 30 minutes or an hour later. But here's the odd thing. Even after the parade premieres and rehearsals end, extended evening hours will stay at the Magic Kingdom for nearly another 4 weeks. Also, at least as the calendar is now arranged, the Magic Kingdom will close each night at 10 p.m., which likely means there's only time for one showing of the Starlight Parade each night. This suggests that there's something beyond the parade rehearsals that needs to be done at the Magic Kingdom between midnight and 6 or 7 in the morning, on multiple nights in late July or early August. I don't want to read too much into this, as park calendars can and often do change, and managers may change the current calendar specifically to give Starlight a second performance time, at least on some nights. But it's also possible that night crews at the Magic Kingdom need this extra time to put up construction walls and other elements to prepare for the Cars Area project. Almost surely managers at the Magic Kingdom will want these construction walls in place before the busy Halloween party season kicks into gear. That's when the park schedule gets really busy, with the park being sold to 2 different sets of guests on many days, one for the regular daytime and a second for the party at night. The Halloween parties start on August 15th, but really pick up at the end of September. In August, the park hosts 3 Halloween parties each week, but by the end of September and into October, they host 4 a week. So if I had to take an educated guess based on the calendar elements and announcements, I think the river will probably be walled off in either late July or early to mid-August, with everything in place before party season kicks off on August 15th. And once those walls are up, construction teams can work over there as they see fit, so long as noise levels are well managed. And I'll add in one more unusual and recently announced thing that suggests that there might only be one showing, at least initially, for Starlight. At least for the first few weeks of the parade, Disney is requiring annual pass holders to specifically get a reservation for the Magic Kingdom if they want to see the parade on that day. Typically, annual pass holders can make a reservation for any park and then shift over to the Magic Kingdom in the evening. But Disney seems uniquely sensitive to attendance levels in the Magic Kingdom once this parade premieres, which is more of a problem if there's only one performance a night, not 2. And so these new restrictions on annual pass holders may suggest that Disney could be considering the possibility of a single performance per night, at least for a little while, as Disney has multiple goals for the Magic Kingdom right now: to rehearse and then present the parade, and then also to use after-hours time to prep the park for the largest construction project the Magic Kingdom has seen since it opened nearly 54 years ago. Again, if Disney had a firm plan to expand performances to 2 a night, I think parade time elements would have been announced by now, as visitors like to plan ahead. But as these elements haven't yet been announced, and as the time for the fireworks have already been adjusted up into late August, I do see some unusual moves that suggest Disney is at least considering its options here, perhaps with an eye toward prioritizing after-hours work in public spaces in late July and early August. But again, we'll know more when it's announced, because I suspect a lot of these elements still inside Disney are in play. Let's finish up with this. Here's what we know about firm plans for the Magic Kingdom. Again, the last day to ride the Liberty Bell or visit Tom Sawyer Island will be July 6th, which is about a month away, and also nearly 11 months after Disney initially announced its closing last August. And the short timeline here without a lot of notice for fans truly surprises me. My guess is that Disney got hemmed in by 2 poles that we've already discussed: the Starlight Parade that is premiering nearly 2 months later than initially planned, which requires late-night rehearsals, and the start of the Halloween parties, which also use the parks to midnight. Between these 2 concerns, specifically the parade rehearsals and the Halloween parties, I'm guessing that Disney simply decided that they needed to use those few weeks to the best of their advantage, even if that means there was no long final period to visit attractions on the river, as there was with the Muppet Courtyard and other recent closures. Also, there is now clearly a small river, or perhaps a very large stream, that follows the walking path and boardwalk between the mansion and Big Thunder. There are also many other water features in Piston Peak, including a waterfall and also some man-made geysers, much like those that once existed in Nature's Wonderland in Disneyland. Again, here Disney is hitting that nostalgia button pretty hard, probably in part to satisfy fans. There will be a second attraction in this area. In the initial art, the one from last year, that second attraction looked to be the size of one of the secondary attractions at Radiator Springs in California, but now what is in that area looks like a playground homage to Tom Sawyer Island, though admittedly Disney has said they don't know what they are going to build for the second attraction. So maybe there's a Tom Sawyer-esque playground and also a family-focused sea-ticket attraction that's just not in the art yet. Lastly, in the presentation, Disney seemed concerned with how this new area would fit various visual themes in this section of the park. They said they would manage sightlines well. The part of the Piston Peak area that gestures towards Big Thunder would have more red and brown rockwork to better blend with the southwest feel of that section of the park, and the section that gestures towards Liberty Street would have more gray rocks and more trees to make that section blend better with the northeast visuals arranged around Liberty Street. So in terms of geography, the far end of the expansion area will look a little more like the southwest, the middle section will look a lot like the Rocky Mountains, and the sections by the mansion and Liberty Street will look a little more like the woods in the northeast. And one more thing here. All of this construction for years will disrupt the Disney World Railroad. Clearly some tracks going to be moved, And construction crews will clearly pass over the existing track many times each day to move equipment from gravel laydown yards into the construction site. So the last time for now to get a full circle tour of the park is also on July 6th. And starting on July 7th, the railroad will move into shuttle mode. You can ride it from Main Street Station to Tomorrowland to Storybook Circus. The train will then shift directions and go back to Tomorrowland and then Main Street. Some of the seating in the cars will be shifted so that some benches are facing forward, other backwards. That way, no matter which way the train is moving, some guests will be looking ahead as the train moves down the track. And I'm fairly sure this change means that now there will only be one train on the track until all the construction is finished. And with this, we're finally starting to see movement on one of the big projects for Frontierland. We are now many months behind the initial schedule, so I'm thinking more of a 2029 opening date. And for me, this Cars attraction as it's arranged now is not exactly what I'd put there. I understand that the island, as large as it is and as sparsely attended as it is, probably needs to go. But I would have preferred a plan that allowed the Liberty Bell to stay in the park. Still the presentation of a river, albeit a small one, along with some Tom Sawyer Island elements, are a welcome addition. There are still many hurdles to get over before this attraction area is truly up and going. The first thing that right now comes to mind are the new higher tariffs on imported steel, as this attraction area will require a lot of steel. And it's difficult to budget out an attraction area over many years of construction if key material costs are continually in flux. But I would expect to see some earth movers and maybe cranes out there behind the construction fences sometime in the fall. But of course, in the months ahead, we'll keep an eye on this project as it moves forward, along with other projects that are moving forward at Hollywood Studios, Disneyland, DCA, and Animal Kingdom. In the outro today, I have one more thing. Today we looked at an unusual situation in which Disney gave fans very little notice as to the actual closing of longtime attraction areas. I'm pretty sure this is the result of unusual demands, partly due to the late premiere of the Starlight Parade. But just as I finished recording this episode this morning, another piece of news dropped about another closure at Disney World, with a far more normative closing timeline. We've already discussed that Rock and Roller Coaster with Aerosmith would close in the near future, with the ride being rethemed to the Muppets and Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. Literally, as I was editing and reviewing the audio for today's podcast, and also as this is the last day that Muppet Vision 3D is open at Hollywood Studios, Disney announced that the current version of Rock and Roller Coaster would remain open through the rest of 2025, and that in 2026, likely very early 2026, the coaster would close so that the ride could be rethemed to the Muppets to reopen later that year. I'm pretty sure the coaster layout will remain the same, so we're just talking some propping, dressing, show set work, and maybe vehicle rethemes, and probably some basic refurb work on the ride system and track. But the expectations are that this ride will open for the 2026 holiday season. So again, as there are no new large attractions that can be opened in 2025 and 2026, the most likely way that Disney will continue to handle this gap is through entertainment offerings such as the Starlight Parade and various attraction rethemes such as Test Track 3.0, the redo of Rock and Roller Coaster, and the arrangement of Zootopia characters into the Tree of Life Theater. Clearly, today's announcement was to appease Muppet fans who are upset about the final showing of Muppet Vision 3D. I enjoyed 2 showings of Muppet Vision a couple of weeks ago, and at that time I said my own personal goodbyes to the attraction. But with this announcement, there is now work going on in multiple parks in multiple areas, so we should again start to see regular announcements for new or deeply revised attractions that are about to open in the near future. So again, there are many projects to follow here, and we'll do our best to keep this discussion moving forward. Lastly, as you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just 2 things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and the parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions, specifically by listeners who join us over on Bandcamp as monthly subscribers. On Bandcamp, you will find over 300 episodes not available on iTunes or anywhere else. But the best reason to join us there is to support the work we do here and to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can support us by becoming a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in our show notes. So, until next Sunday, this is Todd James Pierce.